Today we're going to look at demolished buildings. I'm going to keep this intro short. Nothing is perfect, but since I have a voice, and we all do, we should use it. Ultimately, you should not depend on external circumstances for your well-being, but there's nothing wrong with weighing in on the external world. Thank you for being here this week. I love you all. God bless and welcome. Here I want to look at some demolished wonders. This is an interesting little story or showcase by Jackie Agate, and I like when the people who have no idea about this research we do put together a showcase like this, showing that they have intuition. Something is speaking to them, but they just haven't found my channel yet. They don't have permission to think outside the box. Of course they do, but sometimes a fool like myself must come first. Many of you do, but I don't want to call anybody else a fool. It is my favorite card in the tarot deck, often depicted with a companion dog. So here, this is not far from my house, I believe. This is Goblin Valley, and within 3 or 4 years, somebody went out here and knocked some of these over. They filmed it and put it on YouTube, and I believe they got fined. And I thought it was really interesting that the author of this article included these along with old world buildings. And she's right, again, intuitively. They do belong in this showcase together. And even if somebody knocks these down, the idea is that they've already been destroyed. In our community, we recognize these as the remains of buildings melted in a super cataclysm, similar to the stone circles that people talk about all over the world. People are so baffled by the stone circles, they don't realize what they used to be. Here we can even see faint block lines, windows just cooked down, softened, and almost unrecognizable. Here we have the Beach Hotel in Galveston, Texas, reminiscent of my last video in Atlantic City, all the hotels on the beach. Same thing going on here. This beach hotel, such a creative name, was designed by architect Nicholas Clayton. Property opened in 1883, and they don't give us the date, but it was eventually destroyed in a devastating fire. There we go. 1883 Texas. Good old Texas. Texas Cowboys in 1883 producing this wonder, this short-lived wonder. So massive, they just couldn't keep it from burning. There we go. At least these people enjoyed it on this day. Galveston, Texas. And this is one of my favorites. The Chicago Federal Building. A government building, a frivolous, overly built, now demolished building. The building was much grander, with a giant dome, sculptures, arches, and columns. Despite its beauty, building was deemed impractical. Impractical. I mean, you have enough space to do whatever you need to do. That's all we're looking for with a building. Space to perform the functions, in this case governmental functions. But no, it was unsuitable. And though some sought to save it, it was demolished in 1965. 1965. This is impractical. Now again in Chicago, the Garrick Theater. Here we go. It doesn't look like a theater at all. Stupid. Look at the detail here. Look at the Greco-Roman feel. Just this building, even though it's not that impressive, we see all the flares up here. Just an apartment building or something. And same with this stupid theater. Just a high-rise. A high-rise brick building. Super old brick. Even in this grainy photo, you can see it. Really old and decrepit, busted out windows. It just goes all the way up here. Look at these features, these arches, this flare up on the top. It looks like there's a dome. I can see it up here. And whatever. They're calling it a theater. Here, down here, there's probably a little theater. Bottom. I mean, there's no reason to demolish any of these buildings, especially when they're replaced with very similar ones, not as ornate. And And often I think they may not even demolish them. They just cheapen them, knock off the tops. Look at these arches up here even. Really beautiful feature, giving the impression that they're giant arches, which they essentially are. These are supports. Anyway, it was opened in 1892. It wasn't even built, it was just opened. Louis Sullivan, the architect, of course, the father of modern architecture. Not good enough. They're going to tear shit down. Sorry. By the 1960s, the decision came to demolish this structure to the ground, even amid the outraged citizens. It was replaced with a parking lot. Of course, parking lot, so important. Just a waste of Louis Sullivan's time and everyone who helped build it. This whole block is probably gone. Let's move on. Again, some meltology. I appreciate this author. It once protruded from the shores of Oregon. Unfortunately, vandals dislodged the eye-catching hoodoo in 2016. Their actions were picked up on camera, but the culprits were never found. And really, I think it's appropriate. Whether you are convinced or not, these are remains of super ancient buildings. Super. It's all the same. People destroying evidence before we have time to examine it. Say what you will, but all we have is a photo. Again, some meltology. In Oregon, an arch just beyond the tide at Newport's Nye Beach. Sadly, the formation fell into the sea in 1916. Was there more evidence here? Did somebody hasten its destruction? I mean, this seems like it could sit here for another 500 years. Like, where did it go? Again, I'm thankful for the picture. Now, a true specimen of gorgeosity. Penn Station, New York City. Here we can see the primitive backwards people in the mud, horse and wagon. Just a junk fest as far as the people are concerned. Just looking like a miserable, depressed world. Here somebody has put a cheap sign up that says construction, George A. Fuller Company. Here we go, just setting up shop in Penn Station. Like that makes any sense. Like this cheap sign has anything to do with this building and the true builders of it. If you don't know about the Aborigines, they talk about dream time. This world is a dream, and I believe it is. And that's why we must sleep. We must wake up, recharge, return to our true essence once a day. Once a day, we have a small reset. And understanding this is important to enjoying the dream. If you think it's real and so serious, it might be miserable. You'll watch everything fall apart over and over and over. But if you realize it's a dream, you'll let go. And you can enjoy the dream. You can create within it and not get sucked in and have an experience of a nightmare. You can let go. All the wise teachers throughout history and in the present teach this. It is more important to let go than to grasp, cling, or try to control. And Penn Station was opened in 1910. However, the intricate pile proved costly to maintain, and the decision was made to shut it down and demolish it in 1960. 50 years. 50 golden years. We didn't mean to build this. It just doesn't suit us. We need a cheaper building. Tear it down. But boss, it still has another 500 years of durability. I don't care. Demolish this building. And people were outraged. They didn't say it here, but a lot of people fought to save it. And you see, people have a heart. A portion of the people are cold and serpent-like, and most of us have a heart, even if we don't know what we're looking at. But some people are cold and have other motives. They would demolish a building like this. They would cut down a giant tree. Next, the Hippodrome. Another theater, of course. Look at the tech on this thing. Super antiquitech going on. Gorgeous building, solid brick. And here, like I was saying in my last video, we have a tendency to turn everything into a fair or a circus. Here, this is the circus. New circus features in the Hippodrome. Here we see a little sign that says candy. One down here, ice cream. Just selling junk as usual. Strange configurations of ladders, random windows and doors, row of portholes up here that have been blocked off for this afterthought staircase. Anyway, the venue was too expensive to upkeep. The Great Depression took hold. The theater was closed and completely razed in 1939. A modern office block now stands in its place. 1939. Already this was unsuitable for these people. The Metropolitan Opera House, New York City. Look at this thing. Super dome. Very, very fancy ornamentation on all the railing. It opened in 1880 as an opera house. 1880. It was destroyed in 1967. Disposable buildings, that's all. These people could give a shit. Just like children inheriting things that they don't appreciate, they would squander. We have an entire people acting this way in the early to mid 1900s. The Ohio Cincinnati Library. Look at this. So they demolished this library. Look at these columns and features. And I've mentioned in a past video that these libraries look more like factories and have been repurposed, perhaps a place to store all the old books. And what happened to the books when they demolished the library? I think that's equally as important. In 1955, they opened a new library, and this one was demolished. This one, dating back to 1874, demolished in 1955. Look at these details on the side here. Here we have the Cliff House, Palace, Castle in San Francisco, built in 1896, destroyed in a fire in 1907. Wow. What is that? 11 years? 11 years. That's it. They want us to believe that this building is 11 years old, max. In this photo, it could not possibly be any older than 11 years, if we're to believe their narrative. What do you think? Next, the Sutro Baths, right next to this, not far. So here, this glass and steel swimming pool burnt. Of course, this would be really easy to burn. All this glass, water, and steel. So how interesting. The facility was eventually forced to close in 1966. And that same year, devastating fire destroyed the complex. Oh, so they decided to close, and then just an absolute coincidence that it burned that same year. Here's the remains of the Grand Ballroom in Detroit, Michigan. We see under all the plaster, we have brick. We can still see some of the ornamentation. It was opened in 1920 and waned and shuttered in the 1970s. This one just remains abandoned and is in serious disrepair. So this has a somewhat happy ending, sort of. Old City Hall, Detroit, Michigan, built in 1871. See another towering building behind it. All old world, everything perfect in 1871. However, in the 20s, they grew tired of it, and in 1960 it was demolished. 90 years, not even 100, for a building that could last 1,000, and quite possibly is or was that old. Here's a tower in Los Angeles, California, the Richfield Tower. This thing could be like cathedral or something. Really interesting. Really modern old world is what we're looking at here. And then having this super tower on top, built in the 1920s, had roots to Art Nouveau and German expressionist architectural styles, with its glittering black and gold exterior. In this time period, imagine how modern, again, like I was saying, modern and old world. It serves as the headquarters for the Richfield Oil Company, of course. But this oil company just didn't like the building and demolished it in the late 1960s. This just really looks like something that a big oil company would build. Not. And here we are. Here's what we looked at last week. Hotel Traymore, Atlantic City. Here they don't tell us the build, perhaps because it would be too shocking. As we discussed in my last video, the first hotel was built in 1853. 1853, and by the 1960s the property closed and was ultimately found to be structurally unsound and was demolished. Structurally unsound? This looks like the most sound thing in this picture. Again, something that could stand for 1,000 years. And here we have something in New Orleans, Louisiana, finished in 1908, the Southern Railway Terminal. 1908. Look at the horse and wagons. Look at the primitive cart right here. And these people. Come on. This? 1908? New Orleans? The statue? What? What else? It was right on the famous Canal Street, giant arches, elegant columns, huge windows. However, the eye-catching building was razed to the ground. Why? Why? Well, here it is. Let us pay our respects. Here we have a Vanderbilt mansion. How much did the Vanderbilts inherit? Well, this is just one of their homes. Cornelius. Let me know if you know anyone named Cornelius today. If so, do you call him Corn for short? 1880s it was built. Inspired by French chateau-esque construction, which means castle. It was filled with an art gallery and a ballroom. However, when Corny died, his wife Alice ran out of funds to maintain the property. Come on, ran out of funds to sweep the floor? What do you need to do? Ultimately, they were forced to sell in the 20s, 40 years after it was built. And it was destroyed to make a department store. There we go. She couldn't sweep the floor, so she sold it, and whoever bought it just destroyed it to make a store. Here in Washington, D.C., the Ebbett House Hotel. Again, these people are at their infancy. And we have these buildings going down into the ground. Towering cities everywhere. Towering buildings, overly built. This building has roots, so they don't know. They go back to the 1850s. What a generic thing to say. It began as a humble boarding house. There we go. A humble boarding house. This, at least 500 rooms. Presidents visited the building, but yet it declined and was destroyed in the 1920s. 1920s. And it's not just this building. I mean, look, just this little addition next to it. It's another building stuck to the side of it. So I guess that's it. Just a little tour of what was and what no longer is. I thank you for joining me this week. Do have a blessed day. I love you all, and I'll see you soon.